Okay, welcome everybody to our first video lesson. Hope you take the time to watch this, and I hope you take the time to take some notes on it and place those notes into your notebook or your portfolio. This is a video, so if I'm going too fast or you miss something, you could always hit pause and rewind and listen to anything that you miss. So today's topic is over photosynthesis. And while you're following along with this video, I'd like you to think about this essential question. How do plants use sunlight to change water and carbon dioxide into glucose? So photosynthesis is not a new topic for you. We introduced photosynthesis when we were talking about biomolecules, specifically when we were talking about glucose. So if you remember, glucose, or your simple sugar, is made through photosynthesis. And glucose is that monomer, or that building block for our complex sugars, our polysaccharides, cellulose and starch and glycogen and chitin. In this diagram, you can see that there is a plant growing, and there is some light going into my plant, some carbon dioxide going into my plant, some water going into my plant, and what's coming out is oxygen and sugar. Now that sugar is going to be glucose, C6H12O6. So let's break down the word photosynthesis. So we can split it into two, photo and synthesis. Photo simply means light, or using the light, and synthesis means to build something. So when I combine those two together, photosynthesis, it means using light to build things. In the case of photosynthesis, we are using light to build glucose. So here's another diagram of photosynthesis. So I have energy from the sun, I have my sunlight entering my plant. Also have carbon dioxide entering my plant. I have water coming up through my roots getting into my plant. Those three things interact and produce two things. They produce my sugar, my glucose, and they produce oxygen. Lucky for us, that oxygen has entered the atmosphere, and there's enough of it that we are able to survive. So we need to talk about the equation for photosynthesis. There is a specific equation, and you do need to know it. The equation is going to be 6 carbon dioxide molecules plus 6 water molecules plus the energy from the sun react with each other to make glucose and 6 oxygen molecules. So our equation for photosynthesis is 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O plus the energy from the sun results in glucose and 6 oxygen molecules. So let's look at the word autotroph, because autotrophs are the organisms that undergo photosynthesis. We could break autotroph down just like photosynthesis into two words, auto and troph. Auto simply means self, and troph would be like eating or feeder. So an autotroph is a self-feeder. They are able to make their own food. Plants are able to make their own food. They are autotrophs. The opposite of an autotroph is something that cannot make their own food. They have to eat food so that they could survive. We could break that word down into two words, heterotroph. So hetero and troph. Hetero means other, troph means feeder. And heterotrophs, like animals and you, eat their food so that they could take the glucose from that plant and turn it into energy. So once again, autotrophs are able to make their own energy. Those are going to be our plants that undergo photosynthesis. And heterotrophs need to eat food so that they can make energy. Now what goes into a reaction is going to be my reactant. So reactants go into a reaction. As far as photosynthesis is concerned, there are 3 reactants. There's carbon dioxide, there's water, and there is sunlight. So carbon dioxide adds to water and adds to sunlight to produce two things, glucose and oxygen. So what comes out, what is produced by the reaction, is called my product. Photosynthesis produces glucose and produces oxygen molecules. So my reactant goes into photosynthesis, 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O plus sunlight. My product comes out of photosynthesis, glucose and 6 oxygen molecules. So once again, 6 carbon dioxides plus 6 waters plus sunlight. Those are my reactants. They go in to the equation. And what comes out are what are produced, my products. Carbon dioxide and water and sunlight produces sugar and oxygen. So 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O plus energy go in, and glucose and oxygen come out. Now, photosynthesis happens in our leaves. So if you're a plant and you have green leaves, we could assume that you are undertaking the process of photosynthesis. Now, if you remember, leaves are going to be made up of thousands of cells. And here's a little diagram of a cell. Here's the top of my cell. Here's the top of my leaf and the bottom of my leaf. And all these are cells. So there's going to be thousands of different cells in each leaf. You'll notice that inside of most of these cells are little green things. Those little green things are your chloroplasts that actually carry out photosynthesis. If you also notice, there's some holes at the bottom of my leaf, and we'll talk about that in an upcoming slide. So once again, here is a microscopic view of a leaf, and I have a whole bunch of cells. So I just highlighted 2 cells, and you can see that there's a couple other cells. So here's a cell, here's a cell. All of these little things are cells, and they are separated by a cell wall. So the pink part, what I'm drawing here, is the cell wall of my plant cells. And you can see that there are a bunch of green little dots in there. Those green little dots are going to be the chloroplasts, that organelle that takes the sunlight and turns it into glucose, or uses the energy from the sun to make glucose. Here's a nice diagram of a plant cell on the right. You can see a cell wall surrounding it, and it has that really large vacuole that's full of water that gives that plant cell some structure. And it also has a couple of chloroplasts in here. Those chloroplasts are where photosynthesis takes place. Now, inside my chloroplasts, I have a couple of structures you need to be aware of. There's the stroma, which is this space inside of it. There is a thylakoid, which is going to be this little disc, and there's going to be stacks of them. Those stacks of them are going to be called granum. Now, it is these structures that actually allow photosynthesis to happen, and we'll talk about that in an upcoming video. The other part of it's going to be my membranes. There's both an inner and an outer membrane. One important fact is that membrane is made out of the same thing that makes up these cells' plasma membranes, made out of phospholipids. So it has a head with 2 tails connected to a head with 2 tails, and this makes up the membrane of all of my organelles, including my chloroplasts. This is a nice microscopic view of a whole bunch of plant cells, so you can see all the green chloroplasts inside of that plant cell, or all of those plant cells. We also need to talk about chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the actual green substance that is inside of that chloroplast. So chlorophyll is that pigment or that green coloring that actually captures the sunlight. And the way it works is it captures the reds and the blues, and it reflects the greens. That's why leaves are actually green. They are not absorbing the green light, they're reflecting it. So if I ever asked you what light is best for photosynthesis, the answer would be my reds and my blues. Those lights or light colors allow photosynthesis, while green light reflects off the cell and the plant is unable to use that energy from green light to produce sugar. So the holes in the bottom of my cell. So here's a cross section of a leaf. That's a nice little drawing. Here's a microscopic view. If you look closely, there are some holes in the bottom of these leaves. These holes are called stomata. Stomata are really, really important for photosynthesis because what they do is they allow carbon dioxide to enter my cell and they allow oxygen to exit my cell. So carbon dioxide will diffuse into my cell and oxygen will diffuse out of the cell as photosynthesis is ongoing. Once again, you need carbon dioxide as a reactant, and a product is going to be oxygen. So you can see all these little cells. In fact, if you look closely, you can see some chloroplasts inside the cells, but you also have these holes called stomata, which allow carbon dioxide in and the oxygen that is produced to come out of the cell. So a quick review of photosynthesis. We have energy from the sun, sunlight entering the leaf. You also have carbon dioxide, CO2, coming in through that hole on the bottom, the stomata. And you have water coming in the plant through the roots. Those three things interact to produce a byproduct of oxygen, which comes out into my atmosphere, and a sugar, which is going to be glucose. That glucose could be made as a fruit, it could be stored as a potato, or somehow used by the plant to make cellulose or other types of starch that the plant needs to survive. So that's a quick overview of photosynthesis. I hope you learned something. Feel free to watch this video again. In fact, you can watch it as many times as you want. You could use this video to help you with all of your assignments in Block 1 and some of them in Block 2 and Block 3. All of your assignments from Block 1 are going to be due by November 2nd. If you have any questions, see me during class or come see me during tutoring hours before school, during lunch, or after school. All right, have fun learning. Thanks.